I've never been so terrified and bored at the same time.
I was
All
gonna say
right.
clever to add to that, but I can't think of anything, so we're just gonna stick with that.
So we saw Skinamarink.
Is it Skinamarink? How the fuck do you pronounce this thing?
It's Skinamarink. Don't you remember Skinamarink a dink a dink, Skinamarink a doo? Like it's
No,
Skinamarink. That's
that
it.
that was never a thing I was familiar with. Uh,
What was it? There was the people were joking about like what if we just had this series of horror movies that or just take like a line, just a couple words from a children's nursery rhyme and use it as the title. It's like John Jacob Jingleheimer Schmidt. His name is your name too. But yeah,
Little
this has
Jack
been making
Horner.
waves. This movie has been making waves. I think. Why are you chewing on a straw? You okay, buddy?
This is what I do a
Okay.
lot of the time.
Straws, ice, just fucking chomping on shit.
It's an oral fixations, and I've had since I was a kid.
Ah,
It's like an ADHD thing.
oral
Uh,
fixation, huh?
okay, look, I know you can take it the pervy way.
Anyway,
I've heard it all, Muha. I've heard it
uh,
all.
so this movie is made back like literally, well, like 100 times what the budget was at this point.
I mean, I can't imagine it had that big of a budget.
$15,000.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So now we finally have a third movie. You can finally make a trilogy of a viewing night out of this. You have Blair Witch Project, Paranormal Activity, and you have Skinamarink of movies that were made on a shoestring budget with weird little camera techniques and really, really super independent filmmaking that have made back their budget like 10, 20, 100 folds
Yeah, this
because they were just really innovative for what they were. And Skinamarink, I think, is the most out of those three. It's definitely the most polarizing.
it is a very experimental approach to a horror film that captures a unique childhood experience with or like capturing the relationship kids have with the dark at a young age
Mm-hmm.
while also punctuated by long periods of time of absolutely nothing happening.
Yeah, it's your mileage will vary with this, and the environment. What's interesting is that the environment you watch it in does also affect it very much.
Mm.
And I've heard different things from different people about the different environments. Like for some people, being able to watch this in a movie theater really enhanced the experience for them. And for you and me, I think it really diminished the experience.
Yeah.
Because especially because we were just like right next to each other, just like joking along with it. We're like, all right, I guess this is the whole movie. Um, the majority of the film, straight up the majority of the movie, like the vast majority of the movie is shots of the dark,
Yep.
shots of corners of rooms and hallways, the ceiling, the floor, uh, and it really is just one of those things where you're just kind of staring at different parts, and really, there's no point in the movie where you really like see one of the kids straight on. Like, I don't know what these kids look like.
Like there's only one instance, but it'll go into spoiler territory. And even though
Yeah, let's not do that. But
I'm not gonna into it, but
no, we straight up don't know what these kids look like.
yeah, or
Um,
even like the parents. We don't know what anybody
yeah.
looks like.
So the basic plot of it is, I think one of the best descriptions I've heard about it was, it really captures the mood of kids staying up past their bedtime, like
Yeah,
being a kid and being up past your bedtime and wandering the halls. And it really does bank on this whole idea of how afraid of the dark have you ever been?
yeah,
How afraid of the dark are you still? Um, how much of this experience are you going to fill in the blanks with for yourself? Because a lot of it, it has this really intense film grain going over it, and it it really does make it hard to make out whether or not the camera's moving or not sometimes.
yeah.
because it's so dark and your eyes are just like making it. It does capture that thing where, if you just stare into the complete darkness for long enough, like you start seeing
Yeah.
shit sometimes. This movie captures that really well. And then suddenly a light will turn on and you'll realize that it's just a static thing. Like there's
Yeah.
nothing there.
But like that's kind of what I was talking about before. It and that like yeah, it's a very unique presentation, and it does harness, I think, a very I don't want to say universal experience in childhood that I feel like a lot of kids have, but definitely a common one. Of just yeah, like staying up past your bedtime, being where you're not supposed to be, or even just
Yeah.
exposing yourself to the dark at a long period of time. You don't understand what's inside it. And like so that plays on the fear of the unknown in childhood in that capacity. But a lot of it is just like looking at corners and shit and like old royalty free cartoons.
Well, and there's another thing about it. I was going to say the other thing is watching in a theater for some people that enhanced it, but I I think the best summary of my experience with it was I was bored to tears for most of the movie.
So was I. Yeah.
Um,
But
but as soon as I got out of it, I knew for an absolute fact there was no way in fucking hell I was ever going to watch this movie alone at home in the
yeah.
dark. No
Yeah.
fucking way. That would not, like, I wouldn't be okay. And I think that's a really interesting thing to realize coming out of this movie, because to know that I just was super bored, but also to know that it would scare the fuck out of me in another scenario
Mm.
that I was unwilling to engage with because it would be too scary, even though I was super bored with it. That's a really weird feeling.
Yeah.
I've never had that from another movie.
Yeah. And it's definitely a movie like similarly I would probably never watch in the same circumstances because of kind of reasons I've already mentioned though, because like when you're at home and you're on the couch and you're watching a movie like this, well, I don't even think I've seen a movie like this, so I don't even use that comparison. But anyway,
What movie?
kind of brings in that old childhood fear back in your own home setting. You can't get that in a theater because you're in a room with a bunch of other people in these like comfy chairs. And like it's not the same. But when you're in home, suddenly the darkness in the film becomes the darkness in your house. And suddenly like those old childhood fears, the fears you forgot you had, kind of start creeping up to the surface. That's where that
Yeah.
tension comes from.
I'm getting goosebumps talking about this, dude. This is fucked up. See, this is fucked up. I'm saying I was bored like a fuck in this movie, and I'm just now getting chills and shit. And here's this, you know what it actually reminds me of is the feeling I got after I watched Hereditary for the first time.
Yeah.
Because Hereditary does a really good job at a few points at hiding things in the darkness of the house.
Oh yeah.
When you
Yeah.
see it, you're like, oh, fuck, no, no. And but that's much more explicit. There's a lot more of a movie around it. This
Yeah.
movie is entirely that stuff.
It is
And
very not subconscious, but you know what I mean.
no, absolutely subconscious.
Well, it's
It's
like
absolutely tapping into your own subconscious fears. It's
yeah.
letting you fill in those blanks. And it's whether or not you think there's actually something in the darkness or
They're
not.
like a surreal fear based on childhood anxiety.
Yeah.
Um,
And and one I saw another something someone else said about it was they said Skinamarink is the kind of movie where you'll watch it in the theater and you'll be like, that wasn't a big deal, and then you'll proceed to go home and have the worst night of sleep of your life. Like, it really is that. It's kind of amazing. And I think the thing that hit me about it afterwards was that because I'm not actively sitting there for 100 minutes looking at corners of hallways and shit. Um, the parts of it that stuck with me were the parts that I was thinking about more, and those parts kind of burrowed their way in my head,
yeah.
and now that's kind of what stands out to me more about it. Um, but I will say there's that one part of the movie, and I do want you to talk about what you saw in me in that moment, because there's one sequence in the movie which literally felt like actual nightmares I've had.
Mm,
And this is like the elevator pitch I give for the movie.
mm,
I was bored to tears for most of the movie, but for like 5 minutes, it tapped into this primal,
mm,
visceral terror that I have never felt from a movie before.
mm.
And I have to respect it for that.
Yeah.
I have to.
Yeah.
Because I've never gotten that feeling from a movie before. And the way that that got to me was so it touched something deep inside of me that I just have never felt in a very, very like 30 years, a long time since I was a little kid. And it really like, dude, it freaked me out. Like you saw me. I
Yeah.
remember you were looking at me, you're like, are you okay? And I'm like, not really. All of a sudden, no. Like, because this is like 20, 30 minutes of the movie. We're like sitting, we're like, all right, cool. All right, sure. And then it starts doing this sequence, and I'm like, oh no. No, no, thank you. Oh God.
Was this a sequence in the bedroom? Was that the one?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And
Because
when
I
it starts
remember,
going that, I was sitting there, was like,
no, you definitely are like wide eyed and definitely felt very like seemed very tight.
yeah.
And then eventually got to the point where he's like, "Stop looking at me." So,
Yeah, you were just sitting there staring at me. I'm like, stop it. But yeah, like it was you could see the shift in me, right?
yeah, no, for sure.
Very suddenly I went from not taking this movie seriously to like not being able to escape it.
Yeah,
And like ooh. I can't say that about any other movie, you
yeah.
know?
I mean, I wish there was more of it in there, but there is just
Yeah.
a lot of padding and a lot of I don't want to say repetition, but it did feel kind of like, okay, we're looking at Legos again.
Well,
Um, like, and
okay, so
I get like what they were going for with it. Like, I understand the intention behind it. And the execution just was not as compelling as it could have been. Especially since there are some parts that are very like anxiety inducing and very just like, oh shit, what is
yeah.
happening?
But
Uh,
I think that there's an interesting element of it where if it didn't lull you into a sense of security with being so bored with the rest of it, I don't think those parts would hit as hard.
there's an argument to be made about balance in that regard.
No, I agree. But here's another thing. Like what I find so compelling about this movie is seeing everybody has different reactions to it because there are people who were straight up terrified the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Like it really got to them. And I really think that's the whole reason why I'm like I'm not going to watch this at home alone. Like I can't do this. Is if I was alone at home in the dark and it was the only thing on screen and the whole rest of the house was just quiet and still,
Yeah.
I would slowly start losing my goddamn mind out of anxiety.
Yeah.
Like it would
Fair.
just freak me the fuck out. And I think that that really speaks to the fact that this is like a really, what they're doing is very deliberate and it is hit or miss depending on who you are. And it
Mm-hmm.
definitely was a huge miss for us in a lot of ways in the theater, but it stuck with me.
Yeah.
And the fact that it would hit me that hard, and I know it would, alone at home, speaks to the fact that it actually is, there's something more to it. It's not a
Yeah.
traditional movie. It doesn't entertain you in the traditional way. It doesn't get to you in the same way that a normal horror movie does. So I don't know if I can really criticize it the way that I initially thought I could.
It is difficult without also experiencing it in the at home environment. But also, as you've also made clear, neither one of us are doing that. So,
Yeah. I mean, do you feel the same way? You're never going to fucking watch this at like,
my
you
big
think it
ass
would
cookies
freak
on my
you out if you actually had to sit at home alone and watch it in the dark?
maybe not as much as you. But I feel like it would be a different experience for sure.
Yeah.
Especially if I turn off all the lights, which I feel like is the only way you can do it if you're gonna watch this at home.
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. You can't watch this with the lights on. That would ruin it.
yeah, that's like
Um,
that's cheating.
I heard someone say like, "Oh man, like I could watch this alone at home with headphones." I'm like, "No."
No.
Like, in the dark. No. No, thank you.
Okay, that
Um,
right there, that thought scared the shit out of me.
yeah, right, exactly. See? And what pisses me off is like you see people that are like, "All right, I'm going to watch Skinamarink," and then they're like live tweeting it as they're watching it. I'm like, "You are not you're breaking the only chance that this movie has at getting to you. Like the only potential for immersion
Yeah.
is being distracted by your fucking phone. Don't be on your phone while you're watching this movie. Give it the chance. You're gonna be bored. Just go into it with the expectation that you're gonna be bored for some of it and accept that. Do not break that boredom because the boredom is part of the point. It's weird to say that, but it is part of the point. As someone who was excruciatingly bored for most of it, I'd say it was important. Because if you're one of those people who was bored for less of it, the boredom that is there is important because it lulls you into that sense of security, and you're still sucked into that. You're still looking into the graininess, trying to figure out what's there. And the whole thing about this movie where it's these two kids, these two little kids, like little. We're talking like 5-year-olds.
Yeah, like 6
these two tiny ass kids, whispering to each other in the dark, and the things that they say to each other, it really does speak to how kids actually talk. Like even the whole thing with the Legos and the cartoons, it really is this thing where as a kid, you don't know what to do.
Yeah.
And, you're playing with Legos because you don't want to focus on what's happening because you can't do anything. And when he starts moving his Legos around almost like just to make noise so he can ignore everything else going on. And the point where the cartoon gets kind of stuck in a little loop.
Yeah.
And it keeps going for so long that you're like, oh man, I just want this to stop. And then it stops and you're like, turn it back on. Like, it's just like, I don't like this now. I don't want it to be off. Like this is, I'm not comfortable. And when the whole, oh man, I want to talk about the spoilers a little more. So
before we get to that, we do need, there is one punctuation, so to speak. We do need to talk about our experience in this.
Oh God. Okay, so and I honestly think that we can't top this. We can't top this. This was the best. So
I have to retire right now. I can't use it anymore. Like
if you've been watching this show for an extended period of time, which for like the 2 or 3 of you out there who are consistently coming back and watching like all of our reviews, this is for you. This really gave an incredible, perfect crescendo to our long-running joke about how great it is to break moments of tension with the farts.
So this started in Goodnight Mommy, which we reviewed back when we were both in college. And during this very intense, quiet scene.
No, it wasn't an intense, quiet scene, Michael. It was the climax of the movie. It was the point of the movie where it was absolutely horrifying, where a woman is super glued to the ground. Her skin is super glued to the ground, and her house is on fire around her, and she's just burning alive. And
you remember this so much more clearly than I do.
and in the middle of this, where she's realizing what's happening, and she's freaking out, and she's starting to scream, I just really subdued, quiet. Clearly, he thought he could get away with it. I just hear just from Michael next to me, and I just kind of look at him, and he's clearly like trying to like pretend it didn't happen.
Yeah. Thought
and
I was
he just
so
notices
cool.
me looking at him, and he's like, "What?" I'm like, "You know what?" And he's like, and he knows the jig is up, and we both just start trying not to laugh really loudly at this woman burning alive, which it would seem like to everyone else in the theater. We're just sitting there like, this is not. But since then, there have been various points in different movies where a fart has happened, and it has been hilarious at an inappropriate moment. And I can't tell you, because this time when you farted, the whole theater heard it because it was dead quiet.
It was dead quiet. It wasn't a little squeaker. It was like, and we've been at this for like an hour into the movie.
This is like a solid hour into the movie, and we just started losing our shit, and we're just like trying not to be loud. But I was like, and there were people like rows behind us that were doing the same thing, just like trying not to laugh. And after a solid like 3-4 minutes, I swear, 3 or 4 minutes of us just unable
Dying.
to breathe,
Dying
just
laughing.
dying laughing. The dude, like 4 seats over from us, farted in response. And it, like, all was lost. Everyone just fucking. Oh my god, it was so good.
It's still so funny.
It's the best version of it. It's the best version of it. Absolutely.
Oh my
Absolutely
God.
the best. Like, we can't top that.
Yep. Like
That
that was
is
a
the
case where
conclusion
like
of the farts. Like,
that was a case where people came up to us after the theater and thanked me.
yeah, it was the guy who was like, man, that was so funny. We actually added to the experience for all these super bored film goers.
I know, like I've never been thanked for a fart in my life, so that's
right, exactly. Oh man. So yeah, that's definitely
that's too good not to talk about.
yeah, absolutely. All right, so
Spoiler time.
spoiler alert. Spoiler time, spoiler time. Okay. Let's talk about the things about this movie that, like, the elements of it that worked psychologically that I think were actually good. And what really scared me about that scene in particular, aside from the honestly really effective execution of the voice.
Yeah.
The voice that throughout the movie gets more and more inhuman,
like distorted,
and starts saying more and more upsetting things. Like, there's one point where, it's looking at this darkness, at this hallway, because you got this wall going here, this opening down there, and another wall going down here, and it's just dark on the stairs leading up. And it just says, "Come upstairs." And I'm like, no, no, thank you. And the thing about this, well, we forgot to mention, but the whole thing about it is, there's no doors or windows leading outside.
Yeah,
those have disappeared. That's the whole thing about this. The doors and windows have disappeared, and the parents are gone, except they're kind of not. Except it's not their parents.
Yeah,
and that's the thing that really got to me. It's the whole thing of, I've had dreams where, it's family members or people I know, and they're just being like shitty to me. Like they don't care about me or something. And that's bad enough. That's a different kind of nightmare.
Yeah.
But it's a completely different one where it's somebody that you love. And clearly it's that person. It looks like them, but it's not them. And for some reason, you just don't trust what they're telling you. And this movie captures that, except it's these tiny kids with their parents. And it's this point where it's like, come to the bedroom. And this kid slowly walks to the bedroom, and you go into the bedroom, and there's like someone sitting on the end of the bed. And the kid goes over, and it says, "Look under the bed." And the kid slowly looks under the bed. And I'm like, and then it goes back up, and the person's legs next to them are gone.
Yeah.
And then it looks up, and there's someone sitting on the other side of the bed, and it's the mom. But the thing is that the mom wasn't there. And you don't really know if the parents have had a divorce. Oh no, the mom is alive. Sorry. There is a brief call at the beginning of the movie with the actual dad, where it's definitely like he's calling. It's a divorce that's happened. But she's not actually there in the house. And then she's sitting on the end of the bed with her back turned. And then she starts kind of speaking to the kid, but in this way that, like, she just says like a couple of words or a short sentence, and there's a long pause in between, and it sounds like she's either scared or in pain, or she's about to tell the kids something that she doesn't want to tell them, but she has to, like reporting sad news or something. Like, it's that kind of weird, ambiguous, something is wrong delivery of those lines. And there's something deeply unsettling about it. Like, there's something about it that really, and the crazy thing about it is that, you could say that if you're not really connected to the movie, you won't connect to that scene. I was not connected to this movie at all before that scene. I did
Mhm.
not give a fuck. I was bored as shit. And then all of a sudden, I was like, oh God, why is this fucking freaking me out?
Yeah.
Really freaking me out. Not in a way that's like, ooh, that's a scary thing to see on screen, but actually activating my real life light response
Hmm.
in a way where I'm like, I don't want to be here. I want to get out of here right now.
Yeah.
That's that's freaky, man. Like
Because
I've
like
never
even the
felt that
way
before.
like even when they talk, going back to playing with the subconscious fears of
Mm-hmm.
a childhood, because especially like again, this is not universal but very common. Everyone has that way of talking in the dark when you're a kid, where they're trying like everything's a whisper. No one's
Yeah,
speaking very plainly. Everyone feels like they're almost like they're keeping a secret. They're trying not to wake everyone else up.
yeah,
And that kind of plays into it because that's almost like an unspoken rule of the dark.
yeah,
Um, and like that is very real for a lot of kids, and like almost kind of plays into the fear of the dark as well, because like it's not just you're afraid of waking each other up, it's like there's something else out there that you don't want hearing you.
yeah. And
And
that's really that really comes to the forefront as the movie goes on.
exactly, and that's kind of again, so like a lot of this feels like the fear isn't like it's also one capturing that experience of adolescence, but also kind of playing into that fear of oh, you're not being quiet for each other. You're being quiet so the other thing can't hear you. The imagined thing in your childhood that you just think is there. But in this
Yeah,
case, no, it's actually fucking there and it's actively messing with you.
yeah. And it really does speak to that very interesting childhood kind of monster where if this were a traditional movie monster, there's no reason that that thing couldn't just bust open a door and like it would
No.
be chasing them from room to room. It would be, rattling doorknobs and shit. But this is a completely different thing. This really does feel like a child's nightmare.
Mm-hmm.
And not just like a child's nightmare. It feels like a nightmare that you had as a child
Yeah.
that you still would not want to have. And
So
there's this weird thing where it's like if you go upstairs, it will get you,
yeah.
and it is trying to convince you to come upstairs, and you just need to not focus on it. And it's like the whole thing of like, if you hide under the blanket, maybe you'll be safe,
Yeah.
even if it's right out there. For some reason, you feel like if you're under the blanket, you'll be okay, even though it doesn't make any sense. And this movie fits into that little rule set where it's like there's no reason it shouldn't be able to come down the stairs and eat these kids,
Yeah.
but for some reason, when it says come upstairs, you understand somehow you have to stop yourself from going upstairs.
Yeah.
It's not just deciding not to go upstairs. It's this thing where for some reason you need to remind yourself not to listen to the voice. And as that evolves into something more sinister, where like later it literally says something like,
Like, put a
put the
knife in
knife
your
in
eye.
your eye.
Yeah.
And that was the point where it's like, oh God,
Yeah.
this is getting I'm fucking goosebumps, man. This shit's getting to me.
Or even
God damn it.
like the part where the sibling that went into the bedroom, their brother runs into her later, and her
She's
voice
just
sounds
sitting
all
on the
muffled.
ground, not looking at him.
It's more like her voice is all muffled, and it sounds like really far away, and you're like, like I can't see, I can't do anything. Turns out it's because her fucking mouth and eyes are just gone.
Yeah. And that's the one time you see a face head on in the movie.
Well,
Well,
that also include the very very ending.
yeah, but that's even like
Yeah,
not really.
yeah,
But yeah, it's this whole thing where there's this weird rule set, and it's really hard to properly explain. It really is something you need to experience for yourself, but it does really accurately capture that feeling of a child's nightmare. I really don't know how else to explain it. And I think the other thing about it, I think an important part of not being able to see people's faces, there's something distinctly dehumanizing and alien about not being able to see someone's face. That's why in so many of those movies, when someone walks into a room and there's someone that they know and they're just kind of like facing away from them and quiet and they're not answering when they call their name. There's something unnerving about that, right? Like
Yeah.
there's a reason that's a trope. Because you think, okay, something's wrong with their face.
Hmm.
Something's going on. What's wrong? And in this movie, you don't see anybody when they're talking.
Hmm.
So especially in the bedroom scene where like the mom is facing away on the bed and talking to the kid, it's like, why isn't she looking at me when she's talking to me?
Yeah.
Why won't she look at me? What is she hiding? um and there are all these little elements come together into something that um at its core is genuinely compelling as a film going experience, especially if it clicks with you more. And I do want to say I appreciated how at the very, very end, it did get a little more explicit with the weirdness of the house.
Yeah.
It did actually go into this kind of surprisingly effective sequence where
Mm.
you had these things where clearly this is just this fucked up purgatorial kind of thing.
Mm.
And it kind of extended the concept of this, you know, little microcosm that you can't get to anything else, where it really is this hellish, never ending nightmare
Hmm.
where all of the things in the room are now piled up on top of each other and they're on the ceiling in the corner. And there's this hallway, but it's growing incomprehensibly long,
Hmm.
impossibly long. And
Oh yeah,
you're
yeah, yeah.
still in the darkness. And there's just, the situation with the house has evolved where there is no escape. You're just stuck in here with this thing forever. And you may be able to avoid it. You may be able to survive for hundreds of days, but you're really no better off. You're still in this place. And I don't really know how to feel about that final shot in the movie. Um,
Just the demon, whatever, just staring right at you.
I don't even know if I felt like it was the mom.
I thought it was mom too, but it's clearly also like not the mom. You know what I mean? Mm.
Yeah, like it took the shape of the mother to
Yeah,
finally get to
exactly.
you.
Yeah,
And
but
the thing is,
but
like, it's really interesting that the final shot of the movie is the darkness with the film grain that's been there the whole movie. But you actually do see something in the darkness, and it is a face for the first time, and it is talking to you, and the voice is not distorted. But for some reason, it's so unsettling.
yeah,
By
it feels
adding
like
the
it's
things that they
marking.
removed to make the movie so unsettling up to that point, putting them back in, those things on their own are truly unsettling for some reason. It's really good. Like it's really well done.
Um, yeah, so I think like what makes it seem so unsettling it does feel almost like if it's hey, you've seen this nightmare for the past hour and 45 minutes, however long the movie is. It's like now it's like, hey, now we're actively saying you're next. So you, the audience member watching this right now, you are next, which again is why you can't watch this on your own TV at home. Specifically for that, it feels like you're being marked with something
Yeah.
evil.
Yeah.
Um,
Imagine just having that be the last thing you see in the movie, and then the movie's just done, and you're now alone. Enjoy laying down alone in your bed at night and just in the dark of your room. Enjoy. like,
like,
uh,
can you imagine like if somebody like said like got like someone took an edible or got high or something like that? It's like, hey, I heard this movie we should watch.
oh God, hang on. What was it? I got a tweet for that. I absolutely. Um, Skinamarink. If you watch Skinamarink on mushrooms, there's a 100% chance you will die. um, it really like, and that another one. I should watch Skinamarink on mushrooms so I can die.
Jesus.
Um, instead of watching Avatar 2 on mushrooms like everyone else, I'm gonna trip and watch Skinamarink.
Oh no.
Skinamarink was 10 out of 10, but next time I'm watching it on mushrooms so I can give myself an anxiety attack. Is
Jesus.
Skinamarink a movie that would be enhanced or ruined by mushrooms? uh oh, that's primordially dreadful. I like that
That's a
description.
good description. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's
It's an experiment. It's a very interesting experiment.
yeah.
I as we kind of feel like after we discussed up to this point, your mileage will vary and how effective it is for you. But there is something here that does feel primal. That does feel very almost instinctual in a way.
Mhm.
And I think for like playing into that part of the human psyche, this movie does get a lot of credit. Um, whether or not that's an experience you're in for is going to depend entirely on you because this is definitely a not for everyone film.
I think that inevitably at some point I am going to end up watching this again, and it is going to be at home, and it is going to be in the dark, and I'm going to fucking regret it.
Just
But
text me while you do it. After you do it, just
no,
like I
I
said,
can't
after,
text you after, yeah, but not while.
not while, because like I'm not
Have
because I
to,
don't want to be there, but I will hear
much
what
like
your
cats, you
experience.
need to be trapped with this movie.
Very different reasons.
Very
Although
different
both,
kind of primordial dread.
although
Um,
both very much weirdly enough involve saying the word no when you just hear a voice out of nowhere.
yeah, right. Or a face staring straight at you at the end of the movie, just like nope,
No,
no, nope.
nope.
So yeah, yeah. What a fascinating film.
Yeah,
Um, I have a hard time recommending it to people
fair.
because of everything we've said so far. Like, I mean, again, to be clear, we were both super fucking bored for the whole thing.
Yep.
Um, but at the same time, clearly, even though we both kind of were just very underwhelmed by it for the most part, the fact that we still have this much to say about it
Yeah.
also speaks to something like significant. So I really think it's something that's worth seeing just to make up your own decision.
Yeah. Um. Yeah. So,
All right, cool. I can't even give this thing a number rating.
but just watch it and let it sit with you. I think it's the best thing you can do.
Yeah. I mean, if you watched to this point of the review, I would hope that you had already seen it.
Probably have.
Um,
So as far as movies that came out last month that we still need to cover, I got to Chris Penn Infinity Pool. I think it's the last one we saw that we haven't reviewed yet.
which one? Oh, Infinity Pool. Shit, that's right.
And I know that me and Sarah are going to do 80s for Brady later this week. And
I've
then
heard very bad things.
yeah, and then I know, and then Grant expressed interest doing the Shyamalan movie, so we'll see if we can get that done too.
Really? Oh, I
Yeah.
was hoping to check that out. I kind of want to read the book first, but
Well, it depends entirely if Grant's available, so we'll see if that even happens. So,
all right. Well, I'll try to read the book beforehand so I can.
Either way, that's something we gotta get it sooner rather than later.
It's supposed to be an excellent book too, so I just want to make sure that like, you know.
Well, you're my backup for that one. So if you're gonna read it fast.
No, that's my point. Like the main thing is it's supposed to be a great book, and I don't want to see the movie first and then read it and just have like Dave Bautista in my head as the personification of what I'm reading. I love him. I just like having my own version of the characters that
For
are
sure.
not actual actors as I read a book.
I get it. So yeah, we got those coming up, and then of course we still got to do the best and worst list because we've been pushing that off because life's been still crazy.
Yeah, it's fine. We'll figure it out.
So that'll be in the near future, probably with the next couple weeks is my aim.
Yeah.
So
did you watch Infinity Pool yet?
I was there with you.
Oh. Anyway, all right, cool. So
I
yeah.
feel like you really cherish our time that what we spend.
No, because you said we still need to do that, and I'm like, well,
I mean, as in review, like not as to watch because we watched it together. We were there.
Sure.
Oh,
Anyway,
back here again.
this fucking what is wrong with your webcam, dude? Like,
It's not the webcam; it's USB port. Um. Anyway,
if only you
so
had a fully functional, good laptop to use.
good night, everybody.